Chapter 4561. The atmosphere was so deep that it fell into unprecedented silence. After a long time, the infantile forced a smile on his face and asked, "Master, where are you going?" Feng Fengshen's ancestor noticed the look on the naive face, and could not help showing a hint of intolerance in his eyes. If he could, why would he want to leave the naive? "I am so stupid, so simple and innocent, who will protect her if she is gone? I must be cheated, right?" In the long years, the old and the young had already become dependent on each other, becoming a bond that could not be separated from each other. However, the next moment, Feng Tian's ancestor's eyes could not bear it, and he was resolutely replaced. He turned his head, no longer looked at the naive, looked at the distant extraterrestrial battlefield, calmed his tone as much as possible and said, "Go to a place where the teacher should go." Wu Chuji was silent again, and she knew that she was definitely going to make up for her regrets. In the last battle of the catastrophe, the master did not participate, and the entire universe was filled with corpses. Although the ancestor of Feng Tian rarely said these things, the naive knew that the master did not take action on himself and helped the universe. Pregnant. But now, the battle of catastrophes has once again begun. It is time for the master and his elderly to complete the mission. It is good. Hinchu's face extruded a bright smile, her eyes laughed into a crescent shape. "Master, go early and return early. The young child is still waiting for you to accompany me to continue traveling the universe together." Haha, that's hope for the teacher. The next time you see Xiao Chu, you have found the person who is really willing to accompany you to travel the stars and the sea, not the bad old man for the teacher. He stretched out his hand and rubbed his childish hair, drowned, and Feng Tian's ancestor was relieved. "Fortunately, my apprentice is not completely unable to accept his departure, and his emotions are still stable. In this way, he can rest assured." However, he forgot that the naive was always a very sensible girl. "Yua, that's gone for the teacher. Next time I see you as a teacher, if you don't make progress, you can punish you as a teacher," Shi Fengshen's ancestor said with a smile, and immediately hesitated. After leaving an inductive mark on the naive, he stepped into a laser and shuttled away. I saw him leap, hundreds of millions of miles away, across countless galaxy stars. The speed was extremely fast, and in a short time, he disappeared into the depths of the universe. Wu Chu looked at Feng Tian's ancestor childishly, and there was a dim look in his eyes. Extraterrestrial battlefield, base camp. The Supreme Masters have retired in a state of recuperation, and the entire battlefield outside the territory is quiet. However, everyone knows that this is just a sign of the coming storm. What about the Temple of God? Wu Jushan sits on the main seat and presses his brows. He hasn't stopped for a while these days, and continuously refines the magical medicine of the treasure, hoping that he can help these supreme universes of the divine power. "Master, this is the 9 tea tree teas that the disciples picked on the Jilung mountain in Mingyang Xingyu some time ago. You can rest assured, you try." Tong Lansu held the ceramic glazed teacup in both hands, and came over and said respectfully. A hint of tea scented with heat, rising from the teacup. However, it was surprising that after the heat rose, it didn't dissipate, but turned into a little unicorn. "Huh! This Joshan tea tree is guarded by the Tianji tribe in Jilongshan. You can get this tea from them, and you have a heart." Wu Jushan smiled slightly, took a sip of tea from the teacup, and said with relief, "Master respects, this is all a disciple's business." Lan Su answered with a smile. Taking a sip of tea, the stomach felt that his mood was better. Seeing this, Tong Lansu moved his mind, and tentatively asked, "Master, how much do you think we can win this battle?" After hearing this for a long time, the god of phonology thought back, "I'm afraid it's less than 30%. "Is that so?" Lan Su nodded, a flash of thoughtfulness flashed in his eyes, and then whispered again in a tentative tone, "Master, you have guarded 100,000 chaos times here. If the divine universe is really broken, do you still plan to bury the divine universe?" As soon as this word came to an end, the atmosphere suddenly became strangely quiet. Wu Jushan put down the teacup, the smile on his face gradually converged, and looked at Lan Su expressionlessly, and slowly said, "What do you mean by saying this?" Wu Lan Su heard the words, could not help but tremble. Master, I. He opened his mouth several times and stopped talking, but in the end, he seemed to think of something. He bit his teeth and raised his head to look at the sky. Shen said, Master, except for the virtual god, the snake is not weak. There seems to be support from the phagocyte behind the disciples, and the disciples bravely said that the magical universe has not had much vitality. Instead of burying the divine universe, Master, you might as well discuss with the Xian Shun Hao Sheng whether you can rule the star in the divine universe. With your strength, as long as you talk to the Xian Shun Hao Sheng, I think the Xian Shun is definitely not brainless generation, definitely glad to be with you. Jack. He did not wait for Lan Su to finish speaking, and the Jew had slapped it out, slamming it on Lan Su's face fiercely. Lan Su, are you asking the Master to disregard the billions of souls of the entire divine universe, and for the sake of personal life and death, do you give up the divine universe? Slap this slap down, and slam Lan Su directly and fly out, smashing a big pit on the ground. Disciple. Lan Su stood up, knelt down on the ground, nodding continuously, and the forehead shuddered on the floor. The disciples dare not. When I heard this, the face of the god was still ugly, and he shouted harshly, Get out of the teacher. If you are telling the teacher to hear your outrageous remarks, stop blameful for the teacher and not talk about the apprenticeship and end your life. He didn't notice. Lan Su, who buried her face deeply in the ground, heard the remarks, and then there was a spite of resentment on his face. Disciple knows wrong. Tong Lan Su squeezed this sentence out of her teeth. Hurry up. Wu Ju God shouted again. Yes. Chi Lan Su stood up and respectfully retreated. He just didn't notice that his gaze stayed on the teacup next to the sky for a moment, and a pang of pain and joy appeared on his face. Master, the disciples do not want to be buried with the divine universe. Since you want to go alone, you can't tell right from wrong, then don't blame the disciples first. In his heart silently to himself, Lan Su strode away from the temple hall of the gods. In the great hall, there is only one of the universe. He kept breathing and exhaling, adjusting his emotions, but his face was still iron and blue, and his anger was still unsolved. In addition to his anger, he is more distressed, because he didn't expect that the big disciple with his own hands would say such a rebellious thing. Chapter 4562. Extraterrestrial Battlefield, Base Camp. The seventh team, inside a palace. Jian Wu sat on a futon cross-legged, his eyes closed slightly, his brows frowned. The war between the magical universe and the virtual universe has reached the most critical stage. It is almost expected that when the virtual universe makes a comeback again, it will be a thunderstrike, and it will be necessary to separate life and death from the magical universe. Come. And the response plan of the divine universe has already been decided early. Without him, nothing but death. Therefore, in theory, Jian Wushuang should not have any other thoughts, just quietly improve his strength and wait for the two universes to fight again. However, these days, Jian Wushuang always felt a little uneasy. As for the reason, he knew well. That's because when he was practicing Shenzong, Ban Shan told him the word undercover. Divine power universe, there is undercover. And this undercover is lurking in the base camp. Jian Wushuang thought that with the outbreak of this war, this lurker hidden in the high level of the magical universe should also be exposed, but the first war has ended, and the lurker has not revealed anything. The sound of horses. This could not help sinking Jian Wushuang's heart a little. This lurper, I'm afraid the plot is very big. Chaos. Shake his head, Jian Wushuang no longer think about it, and began to promote cultivation. Over time, one after another, Invincible Supreme rushed to the extraterritorial battlefield. These ancestor-level figures of the top powers were originally in deep sleep, but for this battle, they awakened from their dormancy and came to this extraterritorial battlefield in spite of the decline of heaven and man. They were the last cards and backgrounds of the divine universe, but at this moment they are in full swing. It can be said that, for this battle, the divine universe has been at all costs. With the arrival of these invincible supremacy, the slightly depressed combat atmosphere actually improved a lot, and even some people began to feel that the magical powers of the universe might be without war. With the arrival of Feng Tian's ancestors, the entire extraterrestrial battlefield finally boiled. Feng Tian, The ancestor. That same level of existence as the Lord God of the age. Unexpectedly, Feng Tian's ancestors finally came to life after 100,000 chaotic period. The ancestor of Feng Tian was able to surrender the existence of Zulong at that time. I don't know why the basalt of Fengshen's ancestor did not appear. Feng Tian's ancestors are here. Why worry about this battle? This defeats me. Countless people know that Fengshen's ancestors are invincible and supreme, and they all have to smile. Those who didn't know the ancestors of Feng Tian, after hearing these people's narratives, quickly turned cloudy and clear, and they all rejoiced. The battle of the divine universe and the void universe. Why are so many people so heavy, do not have much hope, but fight with death? That is because no one in the virtual universe can deal with it except the virtual God. The zombie has stepped out of that step. Although he hasn't reached the realm of the two gods, they are only half a grade weaker than the gods. This is where the divine power universe suffers most. Because counting the entire universe, no one can check and balance the zombie god. But it's different now. Feng Tian ancestor, here it is. Feng Tian's ancestor, an innate soul born in chaos. If the ancestors of the ancestors, and King Chelin did not die, they would all call their predecessors respectfully. He is the same as the snake god, but only a little luck away from the gods of the earth and the of emptiness. Feng Tian's ancestors are enough to reverse the sky and change the outcome. Senior Feng Tian. Senior Feng Tian. Some invincible supremacy who dominated an era, say hello to Feng Tian's ancestors. Even the ape ancestor by ape, who has always been taunted and does not look at anyone, stepped forward and smiled slightly. Brother Feng Tian, I haven't seen you for a long time. Feng Tian's ancestor nodded toward the white ape, and then smiled back and said, White ape, it seems that you have to take that step and join us. The patriarchs waved their hands and heard a bitter smile, and replied with a bitter smile, This step seems simple, but in fact it's not easy. Since ancient times, I don't know how many people got stuck at this step. Feng Tian's ancestors did not refute when he heard the words. Indeed, like the former Lord of Life Jingu Gong, but also the Gav Supreme who returned the light and gave a brilliant blow with his life's power, they are all masters who are hard to come by. Are stuck on this step. It is even more difficult for him to really take this step and reach the realm of the cosmic god. Brother Feng Tian, would you like to meet the of the universe first? The patriarch's ancestor White Ape turned sharply and asked with a smile. Meet him? Hearing the name of the Jew, the original ancestor Feng Tian still smiled and looked kind, and immediately turned up, and with a beard and stared, See what this old man is doing. Walk around, don't mention it to me. The patriarch ancestors heard the words and couldn't help touching his nose. Unexpectedly, after all these years, Feng Tian's ancestors were still upset about the matter. However, he could understand it, and then smiled and said, Brother Feng Tian, let me go. I will find a place for you to settle down. It is good. Feng Tian's ancestors' face slowed down, and then he smiled and chatted with the patriarch. In the temple god hall, the god knew that Feng Tian's ancestor had arrived, but he refused to meet him. This guy, for so many years, is still stubborn, the child's heart. That being said, the spirit of the god of God was slightly relaxed. The strength of Feng Tian's ancestors is still clear. He is definitely not under the zombie snake in the nearly tens of thousands of chaos period. Although he is very likely to be unable to defeat the virtual god, but he is confident that he can trap the virtual god. That's enough. This battle, we may not be defeated. The god of God narrowed his eyes, and there was a hint of war in his eyes. Just 1 month after Feng Tian's ancestor arrived at the extraterrestrial battlefield, the virtual universe has finally made a comeback. This time the virtual universe is out of the nest, bringing together the peak combat power of the entire virtual universe. They are mighty, covering the sky and covering the sun, occupying the entire starry sky. The coercion emitted by them alone is enough to crush the ancient and shake 9 days and 10 places. The first to walk with a negative hand was shrouded in endless black mist, revealing only a pair of scarlet eyes. Behind his half-body, there are 9 snakes with 9 snake heads, with the sun and moon, the greedy wolf-breaking army, and other stars printed on the heart of the snake's head and eyebrow. This giant snake is equally terrifying in strength, and with a swaying figure, it draws a dark channel in the void. This person is like a zombie in the virtual universe. At that time, the willow that wanted to the control of Jian Wushuang's deity was the descendant of the snake god. List of chapters with high-speed text. Chapter 4563. Zombie. The virtual universe is like a big man in the sun. Since the battle between the virtual and the of the earth fell into a deep sleep, the zombie has risen, taking over the virtual god, and has become the new hegemon of the virtual universe. If compared with the virtual god, the strength of this zombie is naturally inferior, but this does not mean that he is weak. The strength of the zombie is equivalent to that of Feng Tian's ancestors, and he has taken that step, which is between the realm of the virtual and the six-marked virtual respect. The reason why he did not reach the real state of the virtual is just a lack of luck. Nothing more. Behind the Shushan and zombies, there are two left and right ambassadors. These two are standing in the realm of six-marked virtual respect, the most peak existence. After that, they came out together, with different looks and breaths, but a powerful and unusual six-mark vanity, the third ancestor of Tianyao, the lord of refining gods, and the lord of the Yin-Yin palace. These are the second batch of six-marked virtual respects originally reserved in the virtual universe. At this moment, they were also summoned by the virtual gods and moved in. They stood together, and the breath of them together went straight to Xiao Han, giving people an extremely powerful visual impact. Behind them, there is an attacking army composed of ordinary vanity, and they are also the largest. They fill the entire sky, cover the sky, and are vast and daunting. The most terrifying thing was that in the void not far from them, there were still vague waves, showing 7 figures wearing black robes. That's Bite the organization. At this moment, they are integrated together. It can be said that this force is enough to destroy the sky and the sky, rushing to the sky and falling down to the sky, and swaying the 9 Yuhuang spring. Horrible to describe. At the same time, base camp in extraterrestrial battlefields. Woo. A sharp alarm sounded suddenly at high altitude. The people who were retreating in their respective palaces opened their eyes at almost the same time. Next moment, the deep voice of the gods of the earth sounded in their minds. The decisive battle begins and gather quickly boom. Suddenly, countless powerful figures rose into the sky. The 7th team belongs to Jian Wushuang's palace. Did it finally start? In the eyes of Jian Wushuang, the mango surged 3 inches, and the whole person was full of sharp breath. Immediately, Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and lifted the Taro Excalibur, which was placed aside, inserted into the waist scabbard, and stood up. Let's get started. When Jian Wu stepped on his feet, he disappeared into the palace. When Jian Wushuang approached the base camp hall, the entire hall was crowded. Seeing Jian Wushuang coming, these ordinary supreme, awe in their eyes, and took the initiative to separate a path for Jian Wushuang to walk. Unconsciously, Jian Wushuang has already conquered the crowd. He is no longer just the first person under the invincible supreme, but also the leader of the divine power universe. The word leader is so heavy. Sword Wushuang approached step by step, nodding slightly in response to these supremes. Going to the front, some invincible supremes looked back at Jian Wushuang, and their eyes also showed appreciation. Little guy, it's been a long time. The patriarch ancestor smiled slightly at Jian Wushuang. Senior ape. Jian Wushuang also smiled slightly at the patriarch. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's shoulder was patted again, and a loud voice sounded. Ha 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 ha, little chicken, old man sees you again. Jian Wushuang twitched his mouth, turned back, and saw his ancestor Feng Tian smiling at him. Senior Feng Tian. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and arched towards Feng Tian's ancestor. Hey, little guy, I saw you. I forgot to ask you last time. What's your name? Feng Tian's ancestor said with a smile. Feng Tian Senior's junior swords are unparalleled. Jian Wushuang said honestly. Jian Wushuang? Well, the old man with this name is a bit familiar. When traveling around the universe in recent days, I seem to have heard people say that it was the first day of our universe, right? Feng Tian's ancestor looked up and down Jian Wushuang and said with interest. The junior is afraid to be. Jian Wushuang shook his head. Just when Feng Tian's ancestor still wanted to say something, deep inside the hall, a man with white hair appeared step by step. When seeing the of the sky, Feng Tian's ancestor's face suddenly pulled down, and he gave a cold hum from his nose. "Don't go over and stop talking." The others, too, whispered, staring at the god of eternity without squinting, and their expressions became serious. Ju God was expressionless, his eyes slowly swept from the faces of everyone, without saying any nonsense, but simply saying 4 words. "Follow me." Yes. Everyone in the audience responded, and their voices went straight to Xiao Han, shaking for 9 days. Of course, in addition to Feng Tian ancestors. "It's kind of the whole thing, it's just a whistleblower." He grinned slightly. The of the universe did not care about him, and he stepped on the ground, and the whole person suddenly turned into a streamer, sweeping away in the direction of the outer battlefield. There was a muffled sound, and everyone followed. Just less than 10,000 miles away from the base camp, the 2 sides of the magical universe and the virtual universe met in the starry sky. The of the halt stopped, and everyone stopped. The men and women on both sides stood facing each other. Although there was no speech, there was already a terrifying warfare, and they were uploaded from the men and women on both sides. Swords flew, and they started. "God of God, this time you can't stop it." Shu Shen stood with his hands up, and spoke lightly. The dark fog surrounding him, like a rushing wave, swelled away, surging and surging. "Is it? Zeus is expressionless. Stubbornness." The false shook his head when he saw the situation, and continued to say, "Earth God, our dispute is nothing more than a fight for this cosmic luck. If you wish to self-cultivate, no, hang yourself under this starry sky. Promise not to move the plants and trees in your universe. Murderous heart." In this sentence, I immediately wanted to push the of the universe to the opposite side of the divine universe. Fortunately, Jushin's face was unmoved at all. The supreme man behind Jushin also had no expression on his face. Those who can become supreme are those with a firm mind. How can they be confused by these 3 words? The of the universe is here, and the universe of gods has the opportunity to turn the Jedi. Once the of heaven falls, the entire universe of gods will be reduced to fish on the chopping board, and let the virtual gods slaughter them. Seeing this, Shu Shen didn't care, just sighed and waved forward, then let the killing stop it. Boom. Suddenly, led by dozens of 6-marked virtual lords, he led a common black lord with black pressure, rushing from behind the virtual god, passing by the virtual god, sneered at the man and horse on the side of the divine universe. Hit it. Fighting broke out. List of chapters with high-speed text. Chapter 4564. The dark cloud crushes the city, and Jiaguang opens to the golden scales. The entire sky was filled with ordinary vanities, led by these dozens of 6-marked vanities, just like the locusts passing through the air, and the void was directly cracked. Kill. Wu Jiangxian's beautiful eyes were cold, and her voice was cold. The words fell, and Wu Zhenxian took the lead in rushing out. She is like the aunt who shoots a fairy, with a sword in her hand, enough to cut off all enemies in the world. "Little girls, dance swords and get guns, come here for me." The first ancestor of Qianyaro, the heavenly sacred place of the virtual universe, smiled vaguely, then pulled the right hand directly to open up a secret realm, dragged Wu Zhenxian into it, and started a duel. "I haven't had fun last time, come back this time." The patriarch's ancestor, White Ape, flashed in his eyes and shook his mind for 9 days. The boiling blood was like a big sun, which made people dare not look straight. He blasted out with a punch, as if he was pushing a golden carriage, struck Jiyu Chanting's war drum, and blasted towards the right. The waters of the river are in the sky. And the wine lunatic holding the wine gourd and wearing a tattered robe, shook his head and sighed. Suddenly, the endless innate sunflower water poured out from the gourd, as if the Tianhe River was upside down. The Milky Way rolled backwards, and rushed towards the left emptiness. In a short while, everyone found their own opponent. Slightly behind the ghost of the half position, 9 heads spit out snakes at the same time, looking at the audience. The next moment, his 9 pairs of eyes fell on Jian Wushuang at the same time. "You have the taste of this younger generation." The zombie voice was hoarse and cold. Presumably the little guy who delusions will die in your hands, right? The voice dropped, and the snake head on his far right opened his mouth slightly, condensing countless virtual forces. A terrifying breath spread from the mouth of this snake head. Just when the zombie was going to solve the sword unparalleled. Suddenly, the snake head in the center of his head was patted from behind. "Hey, your opponent is me." Immediately, a grinning voice sounded behind him. "When did it appear?" The zombie eyes narrowed, and he turned around, and saw his old ancestor looking at him with a smile. "Is that a step out of existence? When did the divine universe exist?" The zombie spirit was slightly surprised, but in the information he received, there was no news of the ancestor of Feng Tian. However, only momentarily, he turned back and spit out 2 words. "Interesting. Is it?" Feng Tian's ancestor grinned, raised his palm again, and patted it towards the head of the zombie. "In this palm, it seems that there are countless great worlds disillusioned, and chaos appears, and the power is extreme. There is even more interesting." Just as the palm of the chaos was about to be photographed on the head of the zombie god, the huge snake tail of the zombie had blasted out of the void, like a giant axe, and it came diagonally towards the ancestor of Feng Tian. Far away. Jian Wushuang took a sigh of relief. Although he is now the first person under the Invincible Supreme, he still has a huge gap in the face of the snake who has stepped out of the Invincible Supreme from the realm of the cosmic god. Fortunately, the zombie has now been entangled by the ancestors of Feng Tian, and each of the Invincible Supremacy has its own opponent. On this extraterrestrial battlefield, no one can rule him. Kill. Jian Wushuang's expression was indifferent, his eyebrows were cold, and his sword suddenly turned into a dazzling sword, and he rushed towards the mighty army of virtual respect. Behind the sword Wushuang, there are a number of top elites such as King of 9 Calamities, Overlord, Supreme Ram, and King Jinwu. They suddenly formed a sharp knife, and fiercely inserted into the army of virtual respect. Suddenly, the flames raged, killing and killing. God Corpse, come. And on the side of the virtual universe, the ordinary virtual respect is headed by others, not simply others, but the Moose Wind Elders who refined Shenzhou. This time, the emptiness of the universe not only made up for the flaws of the 6-marked veneration, but also the number of ordinary venerations skyrocketed. Just refining Shenzhou, there are 3 5-marked virtual honors of Moose Wind, Dustbone, and Lan Yu, and rushed to this battlefield. I saw Elder Moose's right hand waving, and in the void behind him, he suddenly walked out of a tall corpse wearing armor, holding a long knife, like the of war in heaven. Elder Moose Feng roared, and immediately struck the tall corpse around and besieged. Cut. Jian Wushuang one sword split a 3-headed, 6-armed virtuoso into 2 halves, then looked slightly towards the Elder Wind Moose. This could not help but let Jian Wushuang sigh gently. In general, during the period of refining Shenzhou, the elders of the Moose Wind left him a good impression. If there was no shelter of the elders of the Moose Wind, I am afraid that the sword is unparalleled. Kill. Sword Wushuang, who was about to collide with Elder Moose immediately, turned the sword peak slightly, passed by next to Elder Moose, and cut to another vanity. Okay. This made Elder Wind's elder can't help but hesitated for a moment. Jian Wushuang's power was strong. He saw in his eyes, and there was some speculation in his heart. Jian Wushuang is certainly one of the most powerful of the magical universe opposite him. In the face of Jian Wushuang, he was not sure. Therefore, when he saw the sword coming and going, he was ready to fight hard. Unexpectedly, Jian Wushuang passed him by. What's the situation? Elder Moose Wind was a little puzzled, but there was no doubt about him, and he slashed towards the others. Your opponent is me. Just then, a low, indifferent voice sounded in his ear. He looked slightly, and saw an indifferent young man with red hair like blood, covered with black godliness, and blood moon in his eyes. This person is impressively the king of the 9 calamities after being enchanted. After entering the devil, the king of 9 calamities not only soared a lot compared with the previous strength, but also became more indifferent in temperament. I miss the kingdom of God. King Jozai spoke coldly. On the other side, Jian Wushuang looked at the scene and shook his head slightly. He can make himself not to fight the elders of the Moose Wind, it is already commendable, Naturally it is impossible to ask others, not hostile to the elders of the moose wind, let him kill. Elder wind moose, critical. Jian Wushuang said to himself. After the Jujiawang entered the magic, he broke through the peak of the Supreme, and speaking of strength, he was not too weak. It's just a matter of life and death. Shaking his head, Jian Wushuang no longer thought deeply, and directly turned into breaking dawn golden light, killing 7 in and 7 out in the army of virtual respect. The war has broken out. In the audience, except for the virtual and the cosmic god, everyone is at war with each other. Certainly, let the gods come and let this battle resolve everything. The of the universe fluttered with white hair, and his eyes flashed. However, Shushan chuckled and played with a tone of tone. Jew God, the human heart is really a complicated thing, are you right? Okay. The god of the gods' eyes blinked a little, puzzled inside. However, he didn't think about it too much, and operated the divine power, so he planned to start a decisive battle with the virtual god. However, the next moment, the expression of the sky suddenly changed, and his eyes showed an unbelievable color. List of chapters with high-speed text. Chapter 4565. How could this be? Chouzhou breath took a breath. Just now, when he was about to run the divine power, he found out that his whole body was enough to cause the universe to explode, and the chaotic restart of the divine power became extremely slow. It was as if he had countless injustices and grieving spirits biting his body in his body, which reduced his strength by at least half. Shushan. Wu Jushan took a deep breath and looked at Shushan. His face became heavy for the first time. Although he doesn't know why his body has such a change, he can be sure that all of this must have been done by a virtual god. In this battle, I am afraid of danger. Jew God, don't look at me like this. This seat is not bothered to use these means to deal with you. Shushu shrugged, smiling nonchalantly. All this, you blame yourself for your own fault. Even your closest people can't stand your approach and see the general trend. The god of phonology heard the words calm, but his heart sank. Immediately, he seemed to think of something, turned back, and slowly said, "It's you?" Hiding in the void behind the gods of the universe, Lan Su and Lan Lan are standing side by side. Among them, the eyes of the earth fell on Lan Su's body. Master. Seeing the gaze of the god of God, Lan Su was afraid in his subconscious heart and stepped back. I don't. Wu Lansu didn't dare to face the stare of the god of the emperor, and said in a panic. Master, what's wrong? Lan Lan was a stunner, and asked a little confused. God did not answer Lan Lan, but took a deep breath, staring straight at Lan Su's dodging eyes. His voice was a little low. Xiaosu, you have a habit since you were a child. You have eyes when you lie. Look around, so don't lie to master. Come, tell the teacher, have you been deceived by the false gods and betrayed the divine universe? You can speak up and be brave enough to be a teacher and not blame you. The words fell, and before Lan Su's reply, Shushan seemed to have heard something funny. He laughed sarcastically. Ha ha ha, God of God, this seat did not deceive him. It is your disciple who ran to Shu the universe came to me and let this seat give him a drop of my seed of origin. As soon as this remark came to an end, Lan Lan, the of God, did not understand what had happened. I saw Lan Lan startled. She stared at Lan Su with a stunned look. It seemed that she could not believe that Lan Su would do such a thing, and was shocked. Brother, have you betrayed our magical universe? Suddenly, the heart of the universe sank completely. Original seeds. The original seed needs to gather thousands of original seeds to fuse one original seed. The power is endless. Once who has planted the original seed, it means that life and death are under the control of others. I am so apprentice, so ruthless. Sister, I do this for the sake of everyone. Tong Lansu seemed to be overwhelmed under the eyes of Jew God and Lan Lan. He bit his teeth suddenly and stepped forward. He forced himself to look up and stare directly at the sky. Master, don't blame this on you. If you blame it, blame you for being too paranoid and too stubborn. To this day, why can't you see that our divine power universe is no longer an opponent of the void universe, and the void universe unifies the two universes? It is the trend. Instead of going to the corpse and traversing the wild, costing innocent lives, Why not make a wise move and choose to surrender? Master, the disciple said something awkward. Did you organize everyone to resist the virtual universe, not for your position as the of the universe? For your own luck. Because you know that once the divine universe chooses to surrender, then you alone it will be difficult to sustain alone, not an opponent of Lord Xianshen. Master, your destiny is destiny. Isn't our destiny destiny? Why do you want everyone to be buried for your own selfish desire? Master, you are too selfish. A series of words, like bangs, spoke from Lan Su's mouth. As if these words, he has been suppressed for a long time, just to burst out at this moment. After saying these words, it seemed that he had drained all the strength of Lan Su. He supported his knees with both hands and gasped slightly, but there was some trembling between his eyebrows. Wu Jushan looked at Lan Su. Jine's original seed from the virtual had already taken effect in his body, as if there were countless bugs eating his body. However, this pain in the heart can't bear Lan Su's words. Wu Lansu's words were like a knife, which was severely inserted into his heart, and he continued to split. Lan was covering her mouth, looking at Lan Su in disbelief. Is this still my humble and gentle, respectful fellow? At this moment, in Lan's eyes, Lan Su turned into a deformed and distorted devil who chose to eat. Lan Su, after taking a break, took a deep breath and looked back at the of the sky. His eyes became sincere. Master, Lord Shushan has promised me, as long as you are willing to sacrifice yourself and lose your luck, he is willing to end this battle, and the two universes will be at peace. Master, you can rest assured that your education is graceful and unforgettable. As long as you are willing to do so, the apprentice will surely support you in your old age and be at peace. After he finished speaking, Lan Su looked forward to the God of God with a look of anticipation. And Shushan heard the words, the on the face is more prosperous, his eyes slightly turned, looking at the cosmic God smiled and smiled. Your disciples are right, God of God, as long as you are willing to do so, how about this one stopping the battlefield immediately? Wu Jushan did not answer when he heard the words, but looked at Lan Su with great disappointment and shook his head. Lan Su, you are too naive. Do you think him dead, the war will really stop? I tell you, by then, the billions of souls of the entire divine universe will be reduced to the pig slaves of the virtual universe Ren slaughter. It will even cut off the spiritual practice of the entire divine universe. Only then will the real calamity befall. And you really thought you could survive? You can't survive this time. The god of the emperor directly called Lan Su's name and no longer called him a teacher. What I mean is already clear. Tong Lan Su trembled when she heard the words, her mouth clenched tightly. No. Lord Shushan promised me, he won't do it. However, this time the of the universe did not care about him anymore, but turned abruptly, staring blankly at the Shu. A flash of determination flashed in his eyes. Shushan, you can't win. Oh, really? Shushan stepped in the void, and the corners of his mouth slowly aroused. It's time now, is it still stubborn? Wu Ju God did not answer, but took a deep breath, saying word by word, ancestral art, chaos revealed. Chapter 4566, Boom. For a moment, the of Ju dying with his hands, his white hair and long beard flying, his eyes were extremely sharp. A wave of hurricane suddenly spread from the feet of the god of Zeus, raging against the bull. Soon afterwards, a rumbling muffled from the entire universe. The sky fell and the ground cracked. The starry sky moves, the sun and the moon change, and the entire sky is boiling. An ancient atmosphere of chaos spread out, covering the whole universe as if to return everything to chaos. Wu Ju's complexion quickly turned pale, and his body continued to tremble. However, in his eyes, it seemed that two flames started to burn. That's dead spirit. Countless two cosmic men and horses fighting in the blood, feeling this Xeon, the horror of chaos from the chaos, are all face changes, horrified in their hearts, and looked at the of the universe. Qi Jian Wushuang is also in the ranks. When he saw the expressions of the gods of the earth, Shushan and Lan Su Lan, he immediately understood everything. Is Lan Su a ghost? Wu Jianshuang sank in his heart. This is something he never thought of. He had speculations about the candidate of the inner ghost. He had thought about whether it would be the Dragon Clan, wondered whether it would be two virtual god, and even guessed the 9 team captains in the extraterritorial battlefield. He didn't think that this inner ghost would be Lan Su. This caused Jian Wushuang's face to flash a moment of surprise and mistake. This is really unbelievable. Lan Su is a disciple of the universe. In terms of status, this universe is second only to the existence of the universe. What a jerk. Wu Jianshou exhaled a long breath, and at the same time understood that since Lan Su chose to expose his identity at this time, it must be that Lan Su's purpose had been achieved. A piece of void fragmentation formed a terrible void storm, like a tornado, raging in the void fiercely. The heavens and the earth exploded constantly, everything was collapsing, and even time and space began to trace back, to obliterate everything and return to chaos. Reverse the time of yin and yang. What's wrong? How could this be? In a hurry, countless people looked up in shock, even those invincible supremes who stood at the pinnacle of the era. Wu Ju's god is really too powerful to say that it opens up the world, it is not exaggerated, as if the creation came to the world, and it is necessary to reshape the heavens and the earth. With his own power, he suddenly moved the whole universe. At this moment, time starts to go backwards. In the eyes of Shu Zun, the mansion skyrocketed, and his face changed as well. It's impossible. It's impossible. Even if I wait for existence, there may be a glimpse of opening up, but it's impossible for the entire universe to go back and forcefully reverse the rules of the universe order. Shu Shen, you are right, the old man can't reverse the entire universe, but it is enough to open up the passage of time and space, forcing you and me into a stream of time and space. The mouth corner of Wu Jushan slowly opened, revealing a cold smile. Today, it is a mortal situation. However, he can also use his decaying body to make the final contribution to the universe. You're crazy. Shu Zun's face changed. He didn't wait for his shot, and the Jew had already torn his hands, tearing the void suddenly. The torn void is like a mirror, reflecting a corner of chaos. Let's go with my husband. The sacred shouted, his eyes opened sharply, his eyes widened, get up. The next moment, the corner of the chaos suddenly shot out of the yellow light, sucking the two gods of the gods and virtual gods. There was a flash of anger in the eyes of Shu Shu, and then he said coldly, Jew God, 10,000 years, this operation will trap this seat for at most 10,000 years. After 10,000 years, this seat can return from the chaos of time and space. At that time, this seat will require the entire divine power universe, kill everything, and leave nothing in the grass, and you will die in this chaos. Hori Morris' cruel voice came from the mouth of Shushan. The god of Phenom did not reply, but when he was about to be sucked into the turbulent spacetime, his eyes swept across the faces of the divine universe, and he sang loudly, remember, as long as my divine universe continues to burn and endure, then my divine universe will one day have a new door. After a moment's pause, the god of God looked at Feng Tian's ancestor and said, Feng Tian, you have fought 100,000 chaos times with your old husband, and remember that you hate your old husband for 100,000 chaos times. The old husband now says sorry to you, you guy. The old ancestor of Feng Feng clenched his fists, took a deep breath, and exclaimed, Old man, you give the old man alive. The old man wants you to give me an apology in front of the whole universe. In the final analysis, he and the of the universe came from the origin and were once the closest friends. If he really remembers hating the of the sky, how could he appear here at this moment? I am afraid that he has already trusted in the virtual universe, and he can't wait for the of the sky to die. At this moment, the vitality of the universe is getting weaker and weaker, and the dissatisfaction of the former is disappearing with it. Wu Ju God smiled. He could feel that the original seed of the virtual had already struck fiercely in his body. I can't hold it long. Feng Tian, lead everyone to retreat, save the fire, they are our hope for the future. Finally, Ju God glanced at Lan Lan, sighed softly, and glanced deeply at Jian Wushuang. Sword unparalleled, the old man will send you a great fortune, and you pick up. Boom. A white halo was slowly squeezed from the heart of Ju Shen's eyebrow, and then a lasing burst into the body of Jian Wushuang in an instant. After he did all of this, the god of the cosmos no longer hesitated, followed by the of the false, and entered the chaotic chaos. He will use his own life force to suppress the 10,000 years of false gods in the chaos of the universe. Alas! The torn sky is restored to peace. Before he waited for Jian Wushuang to look carefully at the last moment of the god, what was given to him, he saw the 9 big snakes, and the sounds of the 9 heads were simultaneously yin-yin. The virtual universe, kill with this seat. Roar. Suddenly, the people in the virtual universe rioted again and killed towards the magical universe. The old ancestor Feng Tian, who stood at the forefront, sank, and was preparing to resist. Suddenly, a thick black beam of arms shot out from the void fiercely, which actually penetrated Feng Tian's ancestor's shoulder directly. Soon afterwards, he saw 7 men in black robes lined up, slowly walking out of the void. He walked in the first, a thin mask with a red mask on his face, showing only a thin figure of his right eye. Eat one. From now on, this war will be officially taken over by our organization. A biting voice was indifferent and spread. Feng Fengshen's ancestor looked up and looked at him, his pupils shrank instantly, his face became severe and dignified for the first time. You, get ready to escape. The heavy voice of Wu Fengshen's ancestor sounded in everyone's mind at the same time. Tissues, you come out and enjoy it at this time, I senti it great. Suddenly, the zombie also changed his face slightly and said, Don't you understand me? Glancing at the zombie for a glance. Next moment. As soon as Devouring raised his hand, he slapped it violently towards the 9 heads of the zombie god. Chapter 4567. This slap was clearly far away from the zombie, but it seemed to be folded in the void, and was severely thrown on the 9 heads of the zombie. Suddenly, the 9 heads of the zombie shook for a while, and a red 5-finger fingerprint appeared. Bite one, you look for death. For a moment, the zombie was furious, his face was extremely blue, and violent murder broke out all over his body. With 1,000 devil around the snake god, suddenly it seemed to turn into a glacier of thousands, and the coldness of Sen Han was like the sea of anger. I can't help but humiliate him for a while. However, just as the zombie was about to attack, I saw one swooping with his right hand, and a huge prism with the word phasing in his hand appeared in his hand. Taking a look of calmness, she took a look at the zombie who was about to fall into madness, and said indifferently, Snake God, I am acting on the command of the Lord, are you sure you want to stop me? Do you want to fight against our organization? As soon as this word came to an end, the zombie who had already planned to perform a killing move suddenly stagnated, changing his pupils to shrink and his expression became cloudy and uncertain. Eat the Emperor. The name is definitely a nightmare in the virtual universe. For the zombie god, bite him without fear, even tie up the whole bite tissue, his zombie does not look at him. But the Emperor, he really can't understand the details, and dare not act rashly. Even if the Real who stepped up to that point was silent, he did not mention the person who ate the Emperor. From this, it is speculated that the Emperor Bleeder is very likely to be completely out of that step. After I was silent for a moment, the zombie took a deep breath and made a cold hum. Don't go over and stop talking. Apparently, he has been subdued. When several people behind Yang Xiaoyi saw this, their faces were full of shame. Suddenly, he stopped looking at the zombie god, but turned his eyes to Feng Tian's ancestor, calmly. You're called Feng Tian, right? Lord the Emperor has orders. If you are willing to give up resistance, the Lord Emperor is willing to include you in the organization. He froze for a while, and then continued to speak. Feng Tian, you join the phagocytosis, we can make you take that step completely without being bound by the cosmic luck. As soon as this remark came to an end, not only did Feng Tian's ancestor's face change, even the snake turned his head violently, looking at Yang's masked face, and a shock came from his eyes. Having reached their realm, I naturally know how difficult it is to really take that step. Otherwise, it will not start from the birth of the universe. The 2 universes, the divine universe and the virtual universe, have only 2 people, the virtual and the snake god. And now, Yang Yi said that they can make them free from the constraints of the universe and take a step forward. This is incredible. Many divine beings on the side of the divine power universe. After hearing this sentence, their eyes were condensed on the face of Feng Tian's ancestors, and there was a touch of despair. Now that the of the universe is no longer there, The ancestors who are the highest in the audience are the ancestors of Feng Tian. If the ancestors of Feng Tian choose to take refuge, they will completely lose their resistance. I saw Feng Tian's ancestors heard the words, narrowed his eyes and looked at the one, the corners of his mouth slowly cracked, showing a smile, and spit out 5 words, go. Eggs. After gnawing at the words, he was not angry or furious, but sighed softly. Pity. Immediately, he said indifferently, kill then, divine universe, one is not left. Yes. Suddenly, the 6 people behind the first bite, all walked out laughing, twisted their necks, and their faces were full of cruel smiles. It's finally possible to do it, it's been too long, too long. Saying a fleshball eating tissue, Yin said. Eat you guys. Another weird man with a full mouth is holding out his tongue and licking the corner of his mouth, showing greed in his eyes. Devouring again looked at the zombie with a negative hand, with a bit of command, you and the virtual universe, also do it. Bite 1, are you ordering this seat? I tell you, you are still too tender. The viper laughed suddenly. I waited for him to finish, and then interrupted indifferently, after all this, I will sue the Lord Eater and let you join the Eater. It is good. The serpent took a deep look and said, Bite 1, remember what you said. After he finished speaking, the zombie glanced across the faces of the virtual universes of the virtual universe, his eyes flashed through the murderous words, and he spit out 3 words. Kill me. Boom tilde. The words of the crickets dropped, and the zombie figure suddenly shuttled. 9 heads were opened at the same time, and they bit down fiercely towards Feng Tian's ancestor. Kill. Dreams of the divine universe, die. Ha 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 ha, kill them all. Numerous virtual respects laughed loudly, immediately following the zombie god. When Feng's ancestor saw this, instead of flinching, instead his eyes rose to war, and Shu Shu laughed, if you want to conquer the divine universe, you don't see enough. Boom. The old ancestor of Feng Tian waved backwards. Behind him, a $1 billion gully-long mark was directly blasted, solemnly speaking towards Jian Wushuang and others, you retreat. Remember, as long as our divine power and the universe continue to burn and continue, there will be dawn in the future. The utterance of the words fell, and the ancestor of Feng Tian no longer hesitated, determined to burn the source of life, and rushed towards the people who ate tissues and snake gods and countless virtual universes. This time, the ancestor of Feng Tian soared. My husband is sealed, come and die today. I stepped out 1 step, Feng Tian's ancestor broke through the breath soared again, and there was only a slight difference from the realm of the god. Suddenly, whether it is a snake or a person who eats tissues, his pupils shrink and his eyes flash with fear. Rewind. This man is desperate. Retreat first, he can't hold on for long. Suddenly, the countless vagrants who were rushing towards Fengshen's ancestors, as if they had stepped on the sudden brakes, their faces changed greatly, and then they retreated. Feng Tian Patriarch. On the magical side of the universe, countless people saw this scene, and immediately burst into tears. Do not. Countless people want to rush away and help Feng Tian's ancestors. However, it seems that the gully tentacle that Feng Tian's ancestor had waved before had already expected this step, just like invisible glass, stopping them all from entering. When the ancestor of Feng Tian saw this, he turned his head back, his face was so cold and somber that he cried, Don't you understand my husband's words? Come on. Keep your life, you just hope. This word fell, and suddenly countless people broke their hearts and hearts, looking at the virtual universe, full of endless resentment. Back. At this moment, the patriarch sighed. Don't let the sacrifice of Feng Tian's ancestors and Lord Gods go to sacrifice. Only alive will have a future. Someday we can make a comeback. Chapter 4568. The battlefield outside the region is a sad one. First, the Supreme Gap, who soared into the sky with his incarnation, made a brilliant blow and started the first battle. Later, there was the Cosmic God, who continued to burn the universe in order to protect the magical power, inherited continuously, and transformed chaos to suppress the virtual for 10,000 years. Until now, the ancestor of Feng Tian burned his life and turned it into a wall, seeking a way of life for the divine universe in the midst of thousands of calamities. a predecessor of the predecessor, for the divine power of the universe, went forward and fell in the hands of the virtual universe. Difficult to hate Fan Xingxuang, poor new stop turbid glass. These seniors martyrs, respect. Let's go. The patriarch sighed lightly and said, everyone, from now on, let us save our lives and protect ourselves. When we shake the flag in the future, we will wait for the revival of the divine universe. Having said that, the patriarch's ancestor grabbed his right hand, grabbed the overwhelming overlord, and immediately stepped away, striding away. He didn't regret his life. He just knew that the dilemma of the divine universe has now been settled. Only by retaining a useful body can we contribute to the revival of the divine universe in the future. We are defeated. The martyr, the gourd fairy, poured a glass of wine from the gourd and sprinkled it on the infinite starry sky of the divine universe. This cup, respect the cover, worship the gods of the universe, honor the ancestors of the heavens, and honor my divine power, the universe and the millions of spirit. Immediately, the martyr sighed and went away. After the martyrs left, many sages gathered in the extraterritorial battlefield side and began to disperse. Of course, there are people with a sense of death who choose to stay on the battlefield and fight desperately with the virtual universe. The divine power universe never lacks the fierce generation. The captain of the 7th team, Heiyuan Extreme, stayed behind and went to death. Want to leave? The zombie's vertical pupil twisted slightly, looking at the man who fled away from the divine power universe, and a sneer gradually aroused in the corners of his mouth. A group of loose sand also want to escape. After that, the zombie shook his head, 4 of the right of the 9 heads, and chose to separate. They directly broke the barriers laid down by Feng Tian's ancestors, led an endless vanity, and hunted toward the divine universe. Sword unparalleled, let's go. The king of 9 kings looked expressionless and said to Jian Wushuang, "It is good." Jian Wushuang nodded, nodding. He is not a fool, he knows his importance. He knows his talents, and as long as he is given time to grow, he can grow and develop completely. Jian Wushuang is not afraid of death, but he does not want to die here. He still has to keep a useful body, revenge for the supremacy of Gav, revenge for the of the earth, revenge for the ancestor of the heavens, and countless deaths in this battle spirit revenge. Well, the garbage of the magical universe, let's die. A monster with no arms on the left and 6 arms on the right, holding a large 6-handed sword, chopped down towards the sword unparalleled. Jian Wu flashed in the eyes of Jian Wu without even looking at him. The 6-armed monster only felt something white and blank, and passed by his eyes. Even if the eyes were black, the whole person lost consciousness. A tilde. Numerous waters were mixed with stumps and broken arms, and they descended from the air as if they had fallen into a rain. Let's go. Jian Wushuang looked at the king of 9 robbers. The Zhoujie dynasty sword. Wushuang nodded. Today, the two should be regarded as the strongest fighting force in the Temple of Life, and they must immediately rush back to the Temple of Life and take them away. Just as the two were about to go away, Jian Wu stepped forward, looked at a dejected woman not far away, and said, "Girl, Lan Lan, will you leave with us?" "It is good." Lan Lanshi nodded her head. Today, she still has a blank brain, and her thoughts stay at the time when the of the universe left. Jian Wushuang sighed, sighing without seeing anything. He waved his hand directly and put Lan Lan in the town's monument. Immediately, Jian Wushuang and Zhu Jie Wang Fei shot away. And the other side? Why is it like this? Obviously it should be peaceful ending. Why the master would die? Lan Su's face was pale, her mouth was tight, her body was weak for a while. His original intention of planting the original seeds for the of the universe was just to let the of the universe see the situation and choose to surrender. At that time, even if the of the gods had been dispelled, the magical universe would be free from disaster and the war would retreat. Obviously, the of truth has promised him, as long as his teacher is willing to let luck, he will retreat. The worst result is nothing more than a divine universe, a subsidiary of the virtual universe. He never expected that the magical universe would fall to this point. Why? I just want to live, and I want everyone to live. Is it wrong? Lan Su clenched her fists, stubbornly but paranoidly said to herself. In his mind, he constantly played back the last look that the of the universe looked at him, strange and disappointed. "You are too naive." The words of the universe kept reminding him in his heart. "Go die." As Lan Su kept losing his mind, a loud laughter burst into the air above him. Lan Su hurriedly looked up to and saw a 5-marked vanity with a halberd, and split his face with a sloppy face. "What?" In the universe, the tragic sound of Lan Su came. And this 5-marked virtual honor with a long halberd, after Lan Su from the top of his head to the waist, split a halberd in half, and then sneered and chased and killed another person. Jian Wushuang, who had already blasted Yuan, looked back at this scene with no expression. "Idiot." Spit out these 2 words coldly. Jian Wushuang and Zhu Jiawang stepped on 1 foot, turning into small black spots at the same time, flying towards the starry sky in the distance. The speed was extremely fast. Kill. A massacre has begun. Countless monks who have chosen to die in the universe have exploded, and do not seek victory, but only to be able to take away a few virtual universes before they die. Heiyuan Supreme cut 18 people in a row, and eventually died. A heroic man named Geishi Haosha, who went forward and succeeded, fell in succession. This day is destined to be a sad day for the magical universe. On this day, the earth trembled, seemingly inductive, sending out a mighty tragedy. A void in the extraterrestrial battlefield. Biting a negative hand to stand, watching Jian Wushuang leave. "Hey, bite one, aren't we going to catch this little guy?" Yang Shi said beside him. I heard a word, and a flash of meaningful light flashed in my eyes, like a smile. "No hurry, he can't escape, let him escape first. I want to see." Now the level of the 2 universes is broken, one of the most important chess pieces is desperate, and Xuani can still hide. Yang Shi heard the words beside him, and suddenly nodded his head. Everything they do is for Xuani. Cosmic Calendar, 6982 Chaos Period. Divine Power Universe, declared fall. Chapter 4569. Kill. Outside the battlefield, there is still a killing sound. Countless Supremes chose to fight desperately, and the last one fell into the extraterrestrial battlefield. This killing lasted for 3 days. 3 days later, the entire battlefield outside the region was dead, with countless stumps and limbs remaining, suspended in the void, as if silently describing the tragic battle. In the middle of the extraterrestrial battlefield, an old man who was already near the end of the oil lamp and his clothes was broken, sitting cross-legged. Throughout his body, there are countless imaginary cosmic corpses, among which there are no less than 10 6-marked virtual lords, and even 3 of them have died here. On the periphery, there are more vanity, staring at the old man with a look of horror. Although he knows that the old man is at the end of his crossbow, he has reached the end of his life, but still hesitates to step forward. They have been frightened by their ancestors. They have never seen anyone who can fight the entire universe with their own power. For 3 days, the ancestor of the letter did not take a step back, and they could not move forward a foot. This is really appalling. In the last catastrophe, the old man hid 100,000 chaos times and hid 100,000 chaos times. Feng Tian's ancestor sat cross-legged, looking around at the name of a virtual universe, and suddenly smiled. No one around him answered, just holding the sword and looking at Feng Tian's ancestor with a jealous look. After speaking, he looked up at Wu Xingxingqi, and said with a pity, "Speaking of which, those old friends of the past have already left, even the old man of the universe, this time also left. I fought with him for a lifetime, grabbed a lifetime, and he was ahead of me forever. Unexpectedly, he was 1 step faster for me this last time." With a bitter smile, Feng Tian's ancestor retracted his gaze and lowered his head, and there was no more movement. Feng Tian, the ancestor, died. It wasn't until a long time ago that the vain honors of those who raised their swords slowly entered dead. A 5-marked virtual respect, holding a long knife, daring boldly, shouted with a grimace. Immediately, the long knife was severely inserted into Feng Tian's ancestor's body and emerged through the body without dripping any blood. Dead, dead. This devil is dead at last. Suddenly, there was a rush of ecstasy on the face of the 5-marked vanity, and he pulled back the long knife, intending to completely destroy the Fengtian ancestor. Call out. Just then, a black robe with a red mask on his face stepped down and appeared in front of Fengtian's ancestor. He flicked his fingers and directly took the 5-marked virtual respect with a knife, all flying away. This person is exactly one. Later, Bit mentions that Fengtian's ancestors have exhausted their life, and the fallen corpse, Shensheng said, thickly buried. Thick funeral. In the battle with Fengtian's ancestors, 9 skulls have been blown up, and only 1 skull zombie remains. When he heard the words, he shouted sharply, "Bite one, this person almost destroyed my Daoji. It hurts my source, but I still want to bury it thickly. You give me the body, and I will repeatedly crush and torture it in order to eliminate the hatred of my heart. When did this decision come to you?" Yang took a cold look at him, then gently pushed forward with his right hand. Suddenly, the ancestor of Fengtian's ancestor spontaneously suspended, rising all the way up, and finally disappeared into the cosmic starry sky. Born in the universe, die in the universe, rest in peace. Yang shook her head, then turned around suddenly, her eyes reappeared fiercely and killed. Kill. Slaughter all forces in the divine universe and reshuffle. Yes. The words fell, and the remaining 4 members of the phagocytosis group, as well as countless vanities, all kneeled on one knee. Just now, in the process of fighting with Fengtian's ancestors, he has already used his strength to conquer everyone in the audience. Suddenly, countless vanities jumped up and flew towards the depths of the magical universe. Divine power universe, in the starry sky. The 3 gods are flying fast. These 3 people are the 3 people who fled from the extraterrestrial battlefields, including Jian Wushuang, Zhu Jiewang, and Lan Lan. Jian Wushuang, what shall we do next? After a period of recovery, Lan Lan's mood is better than before. Although she is still immersed in grief, it is not impossible to tell the situation. Now, as the only one who has made friends with him, Jian Wushuang naturally becomes him, and his main body exists. The King of 9 Kings also asked, "Sword is unparalleled, and now the divine universe is broken. I am afraid that people in the virtual universe will not invade in a short time, and we are the equivalent of the divine universe. They never would allow us to exist, so we have to plan for the next step early." Jian Wushuang heard a deep breath and took a deep breath, nodded his head to understand. No need to think about him, the next divine universe is bound to face a big cleansing, all forces will be hanged, all order collapses, and even if there is no hanged power, it will inevitably become a prisoner of the virtual universe. The magical universe will face reshuffle and start a new era. The only way is to hide in the 9 restricted areas. After thinking about it, Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, 9 restricted areas? The King of 9 frowned. Good. Sword Wushuang nodded his head and replied, the 9 great forbidden areas, the 3 dragons and the phoenix Kirin each occupy 1, and the ancestors of the patriarchs occupy the glacier forbidden land, and the abyss land occupied by the descendants of the dark devil. The big restricted areas are more mysterious than even the invincible supreme. They can't be guaranteed to come out alive. There has been no news of these 4 restricted areas in these years. If we want to avoid this scourge, we can only hide in these 4 restricted areas. King Juyen heard no reply, but groaned for a long time before he said, the sword is unparalleled. The danger of these 4 restricted areas is no less than the threat of the virtual universe. If we enter these 4 restricted areas, we are afraid of death. Jian Wushuang heard the words and shook his head, and replied, this is not the time to weigh the pros and cons. If there are only 3 of us, the universe is big, and there will always be a hiding place. But don't forget that the Palace of Life is still tens of thousands of disciples are waiting for us. After Zhu Jiewang heard a word, he stopped speaking. And sword unparalleled, it is a figure turning, looking at the direction of the Temple of Life, his eyes flashed, let's go back to the Temple of Life first. We must move all the people of the Temple of Life to the restricted area before the army of the virtual universe rushes to the depths of the universe. Chapter 4570. Among the Cosmic Stars. The 3 men, Jian Wushuang, Zhu Jiewang, and Lan Lan, were flying away in the direction of the Temple of Life. Along the way, many top forces have been aware of the fall of the Divine Force universe, and have packed up their belongings and swept towards the remote parts of the universe. Only those Zongman forces and some mortals living at the lowest level of the universe, pitifully still do not know everything, knowing that the world has changed. The whole universe is in a big mess. Among them, a lot of robberies were born. Many were the masters of power, or the ancestors of a certain family. In the past, there were big-headed figures. At this moment, they turned into interstellar robbers, ransacked wildly, searched for all supplies, and prepared for their own spiritual practice. Therefore, along the way, there were sorrows and wars. When a person is free from order, he is no different from a beast. Her sword unparalleled, slapped a middle-class supreme who couldn't tell the situation and wanted to rob 3 people, and then turned into a fan, then said, "We need to speed up, I'm afraid that many forces have the same intention as us and want to hide in the forbidden area." Zhu Jiawang Wenyang nodded in agreement. Immediately, the 3 men did not delay anymore, and all released their breath and flew towards the Temple of Life. Some supremes who originally wanted to rob while taking advantage of the fire, felt the breath of the 3, knowing that it was Zhen Wushuang and the king of 9 robbers, they suppressed the throbbing in their hearts and let the 3 leave. A few months later, the 3 reached the depths of the universe, the Temple of Life. Generally speaking, there is still a bustling scene in the depths of the universe. Obviously, the news that the divine power is broken has not yet been fully transmitted here. The 2 disciples responsible for guarding the gates of the Shrine of Life were quite laid back, chatting casually about the sky. When I saw King Zhoujia and Zhen Wushuang coming, they immediately played a clever trick, and stood up straight and respectfully. "Worthless Supreme, Supreme 9. Zhen Wushuang nodded at him, without delaying the waste of time, but asked directly, "Where are they, the Supreme Master of Blood?" "The Uyghur Supreme Master, they are all in the Supreme Temple." "It is good." Zhen Wushuang nodded his head, and then stepped on, and shot straight into the Supreme Temple. In the Supreme Temple, the 3 are the Supreme of Blood, the Great of the Great Axe, and the Supreme of Heaven. They are talking about the situation of the battle. The words are quite optimistic. Obviously, they have not yet heard the news that the divine universe has been broken. As soon as Zhen Wushuang, King Zhouzai, and Lan Lan stepped on, facing the gate of the Heavenly Supreme, Great Axe Supreme, and Bloodwave Supreme, they noticed them. "Well, Sword King Wu Shou Juju? And disciple of Lord God of the Elder God. Why are you back?" Tina Supreme frowned and asked. At this time, shouldn't they be rivals in the extraterrestrial battlefield and the virtual universe? Could it have defeated the virtual universe? "Yeah, why do you 3 come back, Gavin Supreme?" The Supreme Axe also asked. The 3 swordless men did not answer, but faced the slightly expectant and happy eyes of the 2, bowed their heads slightly, and sighed. He didn't know how to inform the 3 of the cruel news. Of the 3, only the blood was supreme, and he noticed that the faces of Zhen Wushuang's 3 were not normal. He pressed his hand down, and signaled that the Great Axe and the Heavenly Supreme were quiet. Immediately, he took a deep breath, looked solemnly at the 3 men of the sword, and slowly asked, "Swords of Wushuang, is there something happening in the extraterritorial battlefield?" "You can say nothing, it is good." Zhen Wushuang nodded his head. He is not an indecisive person, knowing that the news will come to the depths of the universe sooner or later. Now the most important thing is to hurry up and evacuate. "Extreme blood, we are lost." Swordless eyes flickered and uttered this word by word. As soon as this sentence came to an end, the same stone suddenly stirred up 1,000 layers of waves, and the blood 3 of the Supreme 3 were trembling with anger and shock. "What? Failure?" The faces of the Great Axe Supreme and the Heavenly Supreme turned wild, shocking. They thought that even if the divine universe could not defeat the virtual universe in a short time, it would never have been possible to defeat it so quickly. Of the 3, only the Bloodwave Supreme smiled bitterly, without much surprise on his face. When he saw the 3 of them appearing together, he felt a kind of bad feeling in his heart, but he did not expect it, as expected. "Well, what about Gav?" Bloodwave Supreme breathed 3 times in a row, and then forcibly suppressed the emotions in his heart and asked. "Jeffel Extreme has fallen, Not only Jeffel Supreme has fallen. Master Elder God has also died in the extraterrestrial battlefield. Jian Wushuang replied again. As soon as this sentence came to an end, it was as if in the minds of the three Bloodwave Supremes, dropping a bombshell again. The three Bloodwave Supremes heard that their legs were weak and they almost fell to the ground. How is that possible? How can this be? The blood on the faces of the three Supreme Bloodwomen was pale. It seemed to be drained of blood and couldn't believe it. They never thought that, as strong as the Lord God, there would be a day of fall. Isn't that representative? The people of the virtual universe are about to come in? Bloodwave Extreme raised his head tremblingly, looking at Jian Wushuang. Good. Jian Wushuang nodded his head and replied, the ancestor of Feng Tian used his life to hold the virtual universe, but I was afraid that he would not be able to hold it for too long, and the people of the virtual universe would not take long to erode the divine power universe. As soon as this word came to an end, the three of Bloodwave Supreme lost their minds again. Fortunately, the three of them are not emotional, but just after losing their souls, they regained their spirits. The past must not be chased, the magical universe has been broken, and the of the universe and the like have died. Next, they should consider what to do in the future. Extreme Blood, my opinion is that all of our shrines will be relocated, evacuating from the depths of the universe and looking elsewhere. Sword saw his eyes burning, and said, everyone move. Look elsewhere. After hearing the brow of Qianyang Supreme, he suddenly shook his head and said, no, I don't agree. This is the root of the Temple of Life and the place where I was born. I want you to go. I was born in the God of Life. Palace, you will die in the Temple of Life, but once you die, what fear do I have? Jian Wushuang heard his words, and his brow gradually wrinkled, and he said, Heavenly Supreme, now is the crucial moment. At a time when life and death are at stake, I hope you can take the overall situation seriously. Jian Wushuang, I know you are kind, but unfortunately, the Palace of Life has great gratitude to my nature. I can't betray it and leave. You go, I stay here and send the final journey of the Palace of Life. I would like to the Temple of Life is buried together. Tina Supreme said. Jian Wushuang heard the words, could not help but silence. Chapter 4571. There was a dead silence in the Supreme Temple. Jian Wushuang glanced at the Heavenly Supreme, and then looked at the Supreme and the Great Axe again, and found that both of them were silent. Do you think so? Jian Wushuang asked. Supreme Axe didn't speak, and Bloodwave Supreme said with a bitter smile, Sword unparalleled, you may not know our situation well. The three of us, when we were weak and humble, emerged from this life temple for us. It is not only the ancestral gate, but also the home. How do you want us to do it and abandon this home? Even mortals know how to protect the home, defend the country, fight for the home, and die for the home. How can I leave my hometown and leave my hometown? As soon as this remark came to an end, Supreme Axe and Heavenly Supreme both nodded bitterly. Folly. However, this time, the Sword Wushuang, who has always respected the Supreme Master and others, has unexpectedly snapped and interrupted the words of the three. Every land is lost, and everyone is lost. Extreme Blood, you are seniors. It is reasonable to say that younger people are inconvenient to argue with you, but recently, you have to listen to me. You say that the Life Shrine is home, because everyone in the Life Shrine exists, and it is because the disciples in the Life Shrine exist, that gives it special meaning, otherwise, it is just a piece of land. My Sword Wushuang doesn't understand what is right and what is the truth. I only know that he can treat his body with his own way. The virtual universe destroys my divine power. The universe has countless heroes. I must save my life and work hard. Grow, so that one day we can make the blood of the universe empty and pay for it, in order to comfort the many heroic spirits who fell on the battlefield outside the world. Jian Wushuang's expression was cold and cold. The three Supreme Bloodwaves heard each other, all looking at each other. They never thought that Jian Wushuang would talk to them in this tone. In their impression, Jian Wushuang has always been a modest and gentle person. Jian Wushuang, it seems you are really grown up. Bloodwave Supreme sighed, not angered, but rather relieved. This represents Jian Wushuang, who already has his own opinions and ambitions. The supreme god of heaven nodded and said, Jian Wushuang, I admit that you are right, but I have decided to coexist and die with the Temple of Life. You can bring other disciples to transfer. Taking a deep breath, Qianshuan Supreme continued, Jiang Wushuang, with his talents, he must be able to lead the Temple of Life. If he can come back to the great cause one day, he may take care of himself. After waiting for him to finish, Jian Wushuang said again, Qianshuan Supreme, do you think him talking to you? Wow tilde. The next moment, a prismatic black iron token appeared in the hands of Jian Wushuang. Here is the token of the Palace Master. I have no swords, which is the second sovereign of the Palace of Life. Jian Wushou held the token and spoke indifferently. Wow. Suddenly, no matter whether it is the Supreme of the Blood Wave, the Supreme of the Great Axe, or the Persevering Supreme of Perseverance, even if it is the Zhu Jiawang who is a little far away, when he sees this token, all of them are flashing in his eyes and kneeling directly on one knee ground. I Bloodwave Tianxian, huge axe king of the 9 calamities, meet Lord Gongzhu. Although they do not know where the Palace Master token in the swordless hands came from, the Palace of Life has rules. Those who hold the token of Life Palace are the Masters of Life Palace. At the same time, there was a rush of ecstasy in their hearts. At the beginning, the Life Shrine Palace Master left the Palace Shrine token before leaving. With the disappearance of the Life Shrine Palace Master, this token never came back. And now, this token appears in the hands of Jian Wushuang. Wouldn't it mean that Jian Wushuang saw the Lord of the Palace of Life? Bloodwave, nature, and axe obey orders. Jian Shuang stepped out, his eyes flashed, and he said in a deep voice, the chief of the palace, and the other 3 were involved in raising disciples of the Life Shrine. Later, he and the other masters left the Shrine of Life and found another one. Rest and rest. Can you wait? As soon as this remark came to an end, the 3 of Bloodwave Supreme and Tianyuan Supreme looked at each other. I wait. I dare not. The 3 said, bowing their heads. Well, let's do it. With a big wave of his sword, a gentle force suddenly lifted the 4 people's knees from the ground. Offended just now. Jian Wushuang said a little sorry. This is the etiquette of meeting the Lord of the Palace. Why did you offend? Bloodwave Supreme shook his head, and then paused. Jian Wu. Master Gongzhu, can the former Gongzhu be fine now? Without waiting for Sword Wushuang's answer, Bloodwave Supreme answered to himself, that's it. I'll talk about this later. I'll get the authors first. After that, Supreme Bloodwave stepped away. Now that it has been decided to move the palace, it is not too late to prepare everything. Master Gongzhu, I will go too. Farewell. Supreme Axe, Heavenly Supreme, 9 calamities, and others left. In the blink of an eye, the entire Supreme Temple, only Jian Wushuang and Lan Lan 2 people. Jian Wushuang thought about it, and said, Girl Lan Lan, wait a moment here, I'll go back when I go. Okay, you go, don't worry about me, presumably your beloved wife has been waiting for you for a long time. Lan Lan put a smile on her face and said. Jian Wushuang nodded and said, yes, she has been waiting for me for a long time. After that, Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate anymore, stepped hard, and stood up to the 6th mountain of Life Shrine. Call out. A stream of light, falling in the manner of the 6th mountain, turned into a sword unparalleled in a black robe. From a distance, Jian Wushuang saw a gentle woman sitting on the shore of the manor's great lake and sprinkling fishing lures, causing fish to scramble for food. Hearing the movement, the frosty frost turned slightly, and he couldn't help but look dumbfounded. Alas! The bait in his hand slipped like a thread, but it was as cold as frost, just staring at Jian Wushuang. Fu Jun. Fu Jun. The next moment, Leng Rushuang got up and ran towards Jian Wushuang, and then bumped into Jian Wushuang's arms. She stretched out her hands and hugged the sword unparalleled, as if to incorporate the sword unparalleled into her body. Shuanger, you have suffered during this time. Jian Wushuang sighed softly, and stroked his frosty hair with his right hand, soothing his frosty mood. The pretty girl in her arms was already tearful and choked and lost her voice. For tens of thousands of years, the two had never met, and even the last time Wu Zhenshou returned from the virtual universe to Nanxian Xiandao, but went through the house without entering. Jian Wushuang has owed a lot of guilt to it. Chapter 4572. Fu Jun, you are finally back. Cold as frost tightly held the sword Wushuang. The nails were stuck in the back of the sword Wushuang. Seems to be afraid of such a let go. The sword Wushuang went away. Well, Shuang'er, let the husband check how much you have improved in this period. Jian Wushuang smiled, patted the frosty back gently, and let it go. Chem, is it about to break the supreme soon? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and immediately appreciated. It seems that Shuang'er has worked very hard this time, and he will soon catch up with his husband. Cold as frost heard the words, forced a smile on his face, but a faint surge in his eyes. She could feel herself, and she had less and less help with Zhen Shuang. Although she has exhausted all her efforts to improve her cultivation, she is still farther and farther away from the sword unparalleled. She was afraid to go on like this, and one day, the two would become two worlds. Fu Jun, are you going back this time? Asked as coldly as frost. We'll go. Jian Wushuang nodded, noticing the cold and frosty look. He couldn't help but smile. But this time, we are leaving together. Really? All of a sudden, a look of joy came from the cold, frosty eyes, and he looked forward to Jian Wushuang with his face full of hope. Of course. Jian Wushuang nodded his head and immediately told Leng Rushuang what happened in the outer battlefield. Suddenly, as cold as frost, he became disoriented. They talked a few more. At this time, the king of the 9 dragons, who also lived in the 6th mountain, came flying and said, Sword. Palace master, all the disciples have been summoned, gathered at the mountain gate, waiting for your instructions. It is good. Jian eyes flickered, bringing cold as frost, swept away towards the mountain gate. When they came to the gate of the mountain, tens of thousands of disciples of life shrines had gathered. After tens of thousands of years of rest and recuperation, the Temple of Life has recovered as much as possible, and has slightly increased its strength compared with before, showing a flourishing attitude. If you continue to grow with great concentration, it is very likely that you will become the first force of the divine power universe in the future. Ill wait, Sea Lord of the Warrior's Palace. Seeing Jian Wushuang stepping from the clouds, these disciples all kneeled on one knee and shouted in unison. The sound shook through the cloud. Just a moment ago, they already knew that Jian Wushuang was the master of the Palace of Life and the news that the divine universe was defeated. Their faces were full and solemn at this moment. Okay. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. Behind him stood the top 4 supremacy of Zhu Jie, Bloodwave, Giant Axe, and Heaven. You guys, I want to know that you have already learned about the defeat of the divine universe. Now, we have only one way out, and that is to find another place and concentrate on development. Do you have any opinions? Everything is done in accordance with the main laws of the warrior's palace. Thousands of disciples in the Palace of Life responded, it is good. The sword nodded a little, and turned back and ordered the king of Zhozai, Zhojue Supreme, please release all the spaceships in my life shrine inventory and arrange the disciples to board. Yes. King Zhojia nodded and turned to prepare. Tianshuan Supreme. Jian Wushuang continued to look to the God of Heaven. You are responsible for putting all the books, magic drugs, magic materials, weapons, and source rocks of the universe in the library. Observe. Noble Supreme nodded and turned into a streamer, looting towards the library. Extreme Axe. Sword was eyes turned, and he looked at the Supreme Axe again, and sent orders one after another. Suddenly, the entire Shrine of Life began to move quickly. Immediately afterwards, Jian Wushuang stepped forward and came to Wudao River. Jian Wushuang stood with his hands on his back, stood on Wudao and drank softly. For a while, the dwarf man with a small moustache and a height of less than 3 feet, came out of the Wudao River. Heavenly sword no. When he saw Jian Wushuang, he exclaimed, and before he finished speaking, he saw Jian Wushuang's eyes glared, his head stopped, and he smiled, Wushuang Supreme. Okay. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. This river spirit should be the only person in the life shrine who still doesn't know his identity and the news that the magical universe has been defeated. Gather up and leave me with the Temple of Life. Leave the Temple of Life. He Ling, who was still smirking and charming, suddenly widened his eyes and stared at Jian Wushuang. Then he cried like a cat with a tail on his tail. Well, you are a sword, eat something out of it, and publish personal revenge. Do you now feel that you are terrible, and you want to avenge Master Ben Helaying? I tell you, even if I am a dead head here, even if the Palace of Life is dead, I will not leave. I will live and die with the Palace of Life. In these words, the meaning of righteousness sounded righteous. Jian Wushuang heard the words, and immediately laughed, throwing his sleeves and saying, "Then you are here to prepare for death." After that, Jian Wushuang was ready to leave. Wu Dao He Ling glanced at Jian Wushuang at an oblique angle, snorted coldly, and looked dismissively. Just then, you read the book www.ukanshu.com. A disciple of Life Shrine who packed his bags, passed from high altitude, saw Wu Dao Ling, couldn't help but stop, landed from the air, quite unexpectedly. "Master He Ling, are you not ready to leave yet?" "Leave? Why should I leave?" He Ling yanked her nose, popped a booger, shot it on the ground, and said disdainfully. The Life Shrine disciple couldn't help but feel even more astonished when he heard the words, and replied, "Master Helaying, don't you know that? The magical universe has fallen to the north, and the strong of the virtual universe will soon hit here." After speaking, the disciple stopped saying more. As soon as he stepped on his foot, he walked towards the Shanmen Square. Several of his brothers had boarded the ship, and he could not delay it. What? The divine universe is defeated. The people of the virtual universe are about to attack. He Ling's movement of picking his nose was stalled, and the whole person was stunned. Immediately, he slammed in excitement all over his body, groaning "Mother." The next moment, the river spirit plunged into the river of awakening. After a few breaths, the little gnome-like adult, He Ling, carrying a bag resembling a flower pants, rushed out. "Hey, the little guy in front, wait for my master," he shouted out of breath. "Go to the death and coexistence of Ti Niang." After an hour, all preparations are completed. Thousands of disciples on the Shrine of Life have successively boarded the spacecraft. This made the sword unparalleled, a little relieved. In this case, only the last question remains. Palace, what about Yangshan Supreme? Bloodwave Supreme stood behind Jian Wu's body and whispered. Yangshan is supreme, and his body has long been transformed into a mountain. Chapter 4573. Yangshan Supreme. Jian Wu's eyes looked towards the mountain at the gate of Life Jingu, and his brows could not help being locked. Yangshan Supreme, his body has long been connected to the entire Palace of Life, just like a big tree deeply rooted in the ground. The land under his feet is Yangshan Supreme's chest, and the flowing river is Yang. Extreme blood of the mountain. He has long been separated from the Shrine of Life. Palace, don't worry about me. On the huge mountain, the face of Yangshan Supreme emerged. He looked at Jian Wushuang and smiled slightly. In these years, I can't move, but I've already built a magical power that can hide the breath. As long as I don't actively expose the breath, even if the invincible Supreme comes, I can never see my own body, but only when I am an ordinary mountain. You guys, just leave. Jian Wushuang heard a silence for a moment, then nodded. No matter whether Yangshan Supreme said true or false, just to comfort him to say this, he must only take it as true. Today, he is no longer full and the family is not hungry. He must carry the entire Life Shrine and be responsible for the thousands of lives in the Life Shrine. Let him be indecisive. After a while, all the disciples boarded the spacecraft, leaving only the 4 chief supreme leaders, including Jian Wushuang and Zhu Jiawang. Alas! At this moment, a dull sound came from the direction of the Tibetan pavilion of Life Shrine, and the whole earth shuddered. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows, turned his head, and saw that Tianzuan Supreme pushed from inside the Tibetan pavilion and pushed out a huge dragon-like cannon. This dragon cannon is as large as 100 feet. At the muzzle alone, it has the size of a pond, towering into the clouds, and the dark cannon body is full of bronzing gods. This is... Jian Wu's eyes narrowed, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. He felt a dreadful sense of danger on this faucet. You know, in terms of his current strength, some ordinary invincible supremes cannot bring him such a sense of danger. Gongzhu, this is the big killer at the bottom of the pressure chamber of our life shrine. Destroy the dragon artillery. It is a skull made after the death of Zulong. Although it has only one blow, it can kill. Invincible Supreme. Tina Supreme said with a smile. Oh. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and replied, there are such big killers. Why didn't they take them out when the 6 major forces invaded the Palace of Life? The Bloodwave Supreme came out and explained, the Palace Master, although this dragon artillery is enough to instantly kill the invincible Supreme in an instant, but it has only one blow. At that time, although the situation of the Life Temple was critical, it had not yet reached the gate of destruction to the extent that it is unavoidable to use this thing. With a bitter smile, Supreme Blood continued, well, we can't use this dragon cannon at the time. The dragon cannon must use a special key to start. Key. Jian Wushuang gave a flick. Good. Bloodwave Supreme nodded his head, stretched his fingers toward the sword and sang on his waist, representing the identity of the Palace of Life Jinggong, as a jade-like black iron token, and replied, Master Palace, the key is the Palace of Life Jinggong tokens. The last time the old Palace Master did not return, the Palace Master's token disappeared, and this big killer has been put on hold in the Tibetan pavilion. So it is. Subsequently, Jian Wushuang was informed by the Supreme Master of Blood and used the token of the Palace Master to unlock the dragon cannon and earn it into the Ring of War. At this point, the relocation plan of the Shrine of Life has been completely arranged. Rumble. With the roar of a sound engine, dozens of cosmic boats were suspended in the starry sky, and a roar were issued, and a catapult suddenly flew towards the extreme north direction of the universe. The wind on the deck of the first spacecraft was fierce. Jian Wushuang stood in silent hands, looking back towards the direction of the Temple of Life. With the rapid speed of the spacecraft, the Temple of Life has become smaller and smaller, until a small black spot. I will definitely be back, definitely. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang no longer hesitated, suddenly turned away, no longer looking at the Temple of Life, but his eyes flashed, looking far ahead. 3 months passed. Within these 3 months, a large group of people and horses in the virtual universe finally killed all of them. They walked all the way, they killed all the way, the whole magical universe, a raging flame of war, sorrowful and wild. In the past, the starry sky, which was originally brilliant, was all stained with blood. Begging for mercy, sorrow, roar, and endless roaring madness become all the melody of this universe. In just 3 months, the large and small gates that have fallen have exceeded hundreds. There are thousands of universes, and the entire race is slaughtered by the virtual universe. There are top forces, enslaved by the virtual universe, turned into puppets without self-consciousness, and left to manipulate. At the same time, countless fierce battles broke out in the universe. There is a kingdom of God. The ants and mortals who descend to the kingdom of God, up to the of the kingdom of God, and the supreme state of God are all dying, and they will fight to the last moment of life, even if they are the last to fall for a moment. Billions of souls across the country were silent, without asking for mercy. They only have one sentence. Health, standing health. To die, to die. There are also top forces, the Lord of the Holy Land of one party, who has kept only a trace of tinder and sent the most talented disciples in his sect. He personally led more than 8,000 disciples in the sect. Divine Power Universe, never an ischemic person. In the magical universe, this icy and lonely starry sky, they wrote a series of epics. The space fleet of the Shrine of Life is already getting closer and closer to the far north of the universe and the direction of the 9 restricted areas. In the cabin of the first spacecraft responsible for opening the road, Swordsman, Giant Axe Supreme, Bloodwave Supreme and others are gathered together to discuss the resettlement. The 4 of them gathered around a round table, which was developing a map with divine power. Nothing else on the map, only 9 restricted areas. Among the 9 restricted areas, there are already 5 restricted areas, which were crossed by Jian Wushuang and 4 others. The Palace Lord, the Dragon, the Phoenix, and the Unicorns each occupy a large forbidden area, and the dark demons and the hegemon ancestors also occupy a large forbidden area. In such an emergency, I am afraid that they will not let us in. Therefore, we have only 4 restricted areas to choose from. The blood of the Supreme Eye flashed, Shen said. Gumming Cave. Tomb of the Gods. A land of sorrow. Emperor's ruins. And in these 4 places, no one has actually stepped in and out so far. No one knows what the situation is, just because it is extremely dangerous. Chapter 4574. Gumming Cave. Tombs of the Gods. A land of sadness. Emperor Zhu ruins. These 4 places are the 4 restricted areas that no one has yet set foot in. Jian Wushuang frowned, looking at the map of the evolution of divine power, and turned into restricted areas, without speaking, but quickly thought about it. He already has a preliminary understanding of these 4 places. The first is Gumming Cave. It is said that the formation of the Gumming Cave was at the beginning of the universe. The Hongmenki was divided into 2. However, this turbid gas was not exhausted. The rest of the turbid gas gathered together and entered the northern region together, forming this ancient Ming Cave. It is rumored that in this ancient Ming Cave, there is a large amount of turbid air reverberating day and night, emitting a huge roar, which is enough to scrape bones and flesh, and destroy the soul. Even if it is the invincible Supreme himself, he can't hold on to the incense time in it. Because of this situation, Jiyu Mingdong, without one living, has always been the most empty forbidden area of the divine universe. Secondly, it is the tomb of the gods. Many tombs are buried in the tombs of the gods. And most of these undead came from the beginning of the universe, the dragon and phoenix unicorn calamity, and the follow-up war with the virtual universe, and the mighty undead who died in the War of Calamity. Therefore, the tombs of the gods are filled with these terrifying warfare before the power, and various emotions such as unwillingness, anger, and sadness. With these emotions, even if it is invincible and supreme, if you spend a long time in it, your mind will be affected and you will become a complete lunatic. After thinking about it, Jian Wushuang erased these 2 forbidden areas. There is no invincible supreme seat in the Shrine of Life today. It is too dangerous to go to these 2 forbidden areas. It can be said that as long as Jian Wushuang dared to bring the life shrine into these 2 forbidden places, almost as long as 10 minutes were not enough, the entire life shrine disciples would be wiped out. The ending of his sword unparalleled is just to hold on for a few more breaths. Seeing Jian Wushuang's actions of erasing the 2 forbidden areas, Supreme Bloodwave, Great Axe, etc., nodded secretly. Jian Wushuang's idea almost coincided with them. The Palace Master, then the forbidden land that we can choose is the land of sadness and ancestors. The Bloodwave Supreme Shen began. Okay, I know. Sword Wushuang nodded his head and turned to look at the last 2 forbidden places on the sand table map. The Sad Land and the Emperor's ancestral site are 2 of the most mysterious forbidden places recognized by Divine Universe. At that time, 2 invincible supremes chased each other and fled into the Emperor's ancestral site, but the 2 never came out again. If we say that the tombs of the gods and the caves of Gumming, everyone knows 1 or 2 things. In the face of this tragedy and the Emperor's ancestral site, it is a black eye. The only information I knew was that the 2 forbidden grounds were rumored to have been formed long before the universe was chaotic. Chaos is not on. How old is that? Palace, which forbidden area do we choose? Bloodwave Supreme asked. Jian Wushuang heard this for a moment, then shook his head and said, for us, the situation in these 2 forbidden places is similar. Once we have reached the extreme north of the universe, take another step and look at it. It can only be so. Bloodwave Supreme and others looked at each other, and couldn't help looking at each other, all smiling bitterly. Thinking of their life shrine, when the magical universe is one of the top forces, when this disaster strikes, they have no resistance, and it is extremely difficult to find a hiding place. Just as everyone was talking. Da. There was a sudden footstep on the deck. Immediately afterwards, I saw a disciple in the Palace of Life, hurriedly walked quickly into the cabin, and said, Master Gong, Chief Supreme, there is a refugee road outside the boat, and he wants help. Refugees? Jian Wushuang frowned. Bloodwave Supreme explained by the side, Palace, you do know, and then the universe is killed. Many disciples or elders originally from the big forces are displaced, wandering in the universe. They are refugees. Is that so? Jian Wushuang thought for a while, and did not rashly order him to accept this group of refugees, but said, let's go and see what happens first. After that, Jian Wushuang got up and stood up, walking frostily, towards the cabin. The four chief supremacy of Bloodwave, Giant Axe, Nature, and 9 kings are slightly behind the swords. Walking to the deck of the spacecraft, Jian Wushuang looked up and saw a crowd of people standing in front of the spacecraft. These men were shabby and shaved, showing their embarrassment. The old man, headed by him, had white hair hanging down, covering most of his face, and was covered with blood. At a glance, you can see that these people were just afraid of experiencing a violent killing before they escaped. My lord, my husband is leaning on the horse. In the past, he was the elder of Qianyuanzong, but please keep it. The old man, headed by the sword, saw Jian Wushuang stepping out of the way, and immediately knelt down, hoeing his head again and again. Behind it, the refugees who came from all corners of the world, gathered because of the fugitives, kneeled and whispered words. Father, they are so pitiful, so they are taken in. Seeing cold like frost, could not help but soften. Jian Wushuang heard no reply, but stared at the oblique horse that claimed to be the elder of Qianyuanzong, and looked at it for nearly 10 seconds before turning his eyes to look at the hundreds of refugees behind him. Sorry, our cabin is full and we can't hold so many people. The sword is open without expression on both sides. After that, he turned to return to the cabin. The frost was cold, and she clearly remembered that there were still many places in the cabin. But she always trusted Jian Wushuang, and she didn't say more when she saw the situation. Instead, she took a closer look at the refugees. At this look, she was shocked, and saw something strange. The old man, headed by the refugees, saw Jian Wushuang turned and wanted to leave, and his eyes narrowed suddenly, and a touch of fineness appeared in his eyes. Immediately after, he yelled, Sir, save us. We don't have a cosmic boat. Those in the virtual universe will be killed immediately, and we will all die. I beg you to raise your hand and save us. After he shouted, the refugees behind the old man also cried. The sword has no footsteps. He turned his head again and looked at the refugees, his expressionless expression gradually indifferent. Press over. Jian Wushuang looked at the refugees coldly and spit out 3 words indifferently. Suddenly, the old man's face changed. The next moment, the sadness on his face was gone, replaced by a sinister one. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.